So first, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. As I said, please share in the chat box. My name is Craig Young. I'm one of the leadership team here at the Encore Network. Began my journey with encore.org with an interest in becoming one of the generation to generation communities, along with Doug Dixon and others. And we're very interested in how do we work across generations to help each other. So this topic today is particularly relevant to that. I also am the executive director of Inspiring Service, which is a tech nonprofit that works with states and communities in all aspects of service, from board service, national service, as well as everyday mission delivery. A little about the Encore Network. We're a coalition of leaders who champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people 50 plus by creating community, stimulating learning, and inspiring action to transform the Encore stage of life, as we call it. And we're excited to bring you this webinar today. And today our focus is on our role or potential role in the National Partnership for Student Success. Just a couple of quick suggestions to make the webinar go smoothly. Please mute yourself during the webinar so background noise is minimized. We will have the opportunity to discuss later. Please use the chat if anything comes up and you need to. And did want you to know that this event is being recorded, and we'll send an email to all the registered, everyone who's registered for the event in a few days with a link to the recording and slides if they're relevant. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kate Cochran. She's Managing Director of the National Partnership of Student Success via special assignment to the Everyone Graduates Center at Johns Hopkins University. A mouthful. Prior to this role, Kate served as Chief of Staff and a founding team member at Innovate EDU, an organization focused on closing opportunity gaps in education through the development of innovative models and tools to serve, inform, and enhance teaching and learning. In this role, Kate managed organization-wide business operations and provided strategic guidance and project management support to organizational leadership across Innovate EDU's major projects, including efforts to bring together diverse and often disparate stakeholder groups to address some of education's most pressing challenges collaboratively. She played an integral role in the design and launch process of a school network and after-school program in Brooklyn, New York, where I believe she lives, as well as Innovate EDU's work to develop and operate an urban education fellowship and launch a community of practice to address talent and human capital challenges in K-12 education. Kate was an Education Pioneers Fellow and has a bachelor's degree from NYU, my daughter's alma mater, and a master's in public administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Kate, would love to pass it over to you and really look forward to having you share information about the National Partnership.
Thank you so much, Craig, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate Cochran, and I'm excited to provide you with some more information, both on the National Partnership for Student Success and how we're currently thinking about this initiative and what we're working on, as well as how you, your organization, your network, or your community, depending on your role, how you can get involved. I'm going to start with a very brief 1.5 minute video overview that'll on the initiative to get us kicked off. And then I'll go into a brief overview. And then really, I want to spend the bulk of our conversation or our time today really hearing from you and getting your input on how we might collaborate. So with that, I will start this video.
America's students have so much potential to learn and thrive in school and beyond. To meet this moment, we need more caring adults in and out of schools alongside of educators and families working to address critical educational and mental health challenges exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Partnership for Student Success helps our students thrive. It brings together experienced organizations to recruit, train, and engage additional caring adults to serve as tutors, mentors, student success coaches, wraparound service coordinators, and post-secondary transition coaches. These adults are answering the call to serve at this critical moment. Working to support students, families, educators, and communities, the National Partnership for Student Success helps our communities ensure that every student has the support they need to succeed and thrive in our 21st century democracy and economy. A collective effort that brings together the Biden-Harris administration, led by the U.S. Department of Education and AmeriCorps, and a growing coalition of over 70 leading education and youth-serving organizations, educators, collaboratives, and school districts, with technical assistance from the Johns Hopkins Everyone Graduates Center and 6 leading national organizations. The MPSS helps schools, educators, nonprofit organizations, and communities connect all students with the holistic, people-powered supports they need to learn and achieve their potential. Because making sure our nation's young people have what they need to thrive will require all of us. Join our effort today.
So to provide a bit more detail, I find that sometimes the video is more succinct than I would be on these types of calls. But to provide a bit more detail on the work that we've been doing, we launched this initiative alongside AmeriCorps and the U.S. Department of Education on July 5th at the White House. And this happened, or it coincided with a call to action from the president for an additional 250,000 Americans to serve in high impact roles, and really focused on the 5 roles that you see on my screen. So tutors, mentors, student success coaches, post-secondary transition coaches, and wraparound or integrated student support coordinators. And this is our big goal over the course of the next 3 years. And depending on the setting, we know that people in these roles already do and can be volunteers. They can be full or part-time employees, or they can be AmeriCorps members. And people in each of these roles also work side by side with teachers, educators, and other youth-serving professionals in school and during out-of-school time settings, such as after-school programs or summer programs. And each of these roles, we're really focused on these because research indicates that they can result in gains in both reading and math, high school and college graduation rates, reductions in chronic absenteeism, and improved connections between student and school and student and community, which can result in improved student mental health and well-being. And so really, more structurally, we are starting to support school districts, AmeriCorps state service commissions, local and state government agencies, student support providers, and community-based and national nonprofit organizations to think about how they might increase the number of students who are receiving these evidence-based and people-powered supports based on locally determined needs and using existing revenue. And existing revenue could include American Rescue Plan funds, federal education funds, state and local resources, as well as AmeriCorps programs. And we believe this initiative will help to address both long-standing inequities and opportunity gaps in education, which have been exacerbated and highlighted by the pandemic, while also addressing some of the shorter-term urgent needs that students, educators, schools, and communities are facing right now. And we saw this a bit in that intro video, but we now have a coalition of about 100 organizations who are signed on as supporting champions to the MPSS to support this work moving forward. And these organizations are aligned with our mission and vision for what the MPSS is working on, and are committed to sharing information, resources, engaging in thought partnership in conversations like this to support and ensure the MPSS and ensure that what we are doing actually serves students, schools, and communities, and is also grounded in the needs of communities. So we are really, the vision for this is that we are addressing both the critical urgent need right now, as well as creating a kind of over the longer term, an education system that mitigates the effects of instructional loss by re-engaging and supporting students. We're looking to relieve a lot of the educator, school leader, and parent overwhelm that exists given some of these unprecedented challenges that folks are facing, by providing additional people-powered student supports. We're looking to support school districts, schools, and community organizations to create and sustain durable partnerships to leverage assets that already exist within communities, and also to provide pathways to productive work and learning opportunities for adults who are called to national service and to the field of education and youth work more broadly. And of course, we're also hoping that this effort will accelerate student academic recovery, as well as improve or reduce chronic absenteeism and improve student mental health and well-being through creating stronger, more robust connections between students and schools and students and communities. So as I talk about upcoming priorities, we're aware that recruitment is a major challenge throughout the field of education, national service, youth work, and we're working to promote and amplify the importance of this work with support from the Biden-Harris administration, including the Department of Education and AmeriCorps, to encourage individuals, employers, colleges, universities, and others to engage themselves in their workforces in service. We know that as relevant to this network, older Americans have and people who are retired in particular and want to give back to their communities have critical roles to play in responding to the president's call to action here. And already at the MPSS, we're seeing quite a bit of interest, and I'm excited to hear from our next speaker, who I think may speak to this a bit more, but a lot of interest from people who are self-identifying as retired and looking for opportunities to give back to their community. And our desire is to amplify the value of service, both to individuals who are receiving this support, but also people who are providing the support. And a couple other things. So that's a big piece of why we're looking to amplify this work. We're doing a lot of work to think about where these additional 250,000 people will come from to engage in this type of work. We know that a lot of people are already doing great work, and we are working with a number of different stakeholder groups to think about how we might increase or incentivize folks where we believe there are large kind of untapped sources of people power who are already interested and motivated to do this type of work. So we're thinking, one, about older Americans, folks who are, increasing number of retirements during the pandemic, and people who are ready and excited to give back to their community in meaningful ways and continue to develop professionally in their retirement. We're thinking about college students and how we can partner with colleges and universities to leverage work study funding, civic engagement clubs, for-credit programs, and other opportunities to get more college students engaged in this work. We're thinking about corporate volunteers, just to give you a few. We're starting to do this work of connecting school districts, community partners, and student support organizations at the local level. And we're also doing a lot of work to develop a set of quality markers so that we have a common definition of what we mean by quality when we talk about offerings or programs in each of those 5 evidence-based student support categories. And that work is being done by a working group that includes experts in each of those 5 student support categories, as well as leaders in youth development. So I'll go through quickly a couple ways to get involved before I pass it over to some other speakers and we dive into our conversation. But I know this is a diverse group on this call, and there are a couple different ways that you could get involved. And Sadia, if you're able to put these links in the chat as we go, I would greatly appreciate it. So the nonprofit support hub at the NPSS that's operated through Johns Hopkins University provides free technical assistance to nonprofit organizations, local or state government agencies, or schools and districts that are looking to implement new programs that include one or more of those 5 roles that I mentioned. So tutors, mentors, student success coaches, post-secondary transition coaches, and or wraparound and integrated student support coordinators. So we provide technical assistance to people who are looking to implement those programs, expand existing programs, or improve the quality of existing programs. So if this is something that you're interested in, that you're working on, and be excited to connect with us about how to do that efficiently, I encourage you to apply for technical assistance. I also encourage you to, if you represent an organization that is already providing these types of supports, and is looking to connect with other organizations within our network of supporting champions, really to engage in conversation about what's working, what's not, how can we build upon the existing great work that people are doing and share lessons learned and best practices rather than build anew. I encourage you to apply to be a supporting champion of the NPSS. At this stage, supporting champions need to be either public government entities or nonprofit organizations, and need to either be doing work that is aligned to one of these 5 roles, or represent a key stakeholder group, whether it's community leaders, whether it's educators, whether it's students. So we have a pretty broad and diverse group of champions who are involved, and would love for you to apply as well. We do quite a bit of social media outreach, in particular sharing information on events, resources, updates. So I encourage you to follow us on social media. And then finally, we are consistently looking to spotlight places where quality work is already taking place. And in particular, I'll ask you all about this in a bit, but in particular, innovative solutions. We're operating these, people are operating programs at a really challenging time, when students, schools, communities, organizations are facing unprecedented challenges, and it requires quite a bit of creativity. And we're looking to spotlight creative solutions to addressing some of these really pressing challenges. So if your organization or someone in your network you think would be exciting to spotlight via the NPSS, please do reach out to me via email, and we'd love to have a conversation. I will also always want to plug our 101 webinar series that is in progress that really dives deeper into each of these 5 student support roles. I'll make sure that Craig and his team have all the details here, so this can be shared via email. But if you're looking for, this group may not be the audience for these webinars, but I do find that folks who are interested in, whether they're parents, whether they're educators, whether they're community members who are looking to just learn a little bit more about why is mentoring valuable? Why is this something that we might want to consider participating in or implementing? This set of webinars is helpful for kind of a general public audience here. So I encourage you to attend or watch the recordings of past sessions. And with that, Craig, am I passing it over to you or directly to Mary?
No, actually, passing it over to me. And I think Mary's going to be able to give us a great example of one of those bright spots that you mentioned. And so why don't we go there first, and then after that, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from Jenna Holmes and how this looks at a state level. So as most of you probably know, federal money flows to states, whether that's for national service positions or whether that's for education. And so, states play a really critical role in this process, and Jen is going to be able to share a lot of that perspective, especially from a state that's really taking a leadership role in addressing this. But first, Mary, we would love to hear one of those bright spots that we know. And Mary's part of Oasis. Oasis has been part of the Encore network longer than I have been, so for a very long time. So thanks for being here, Mary. We look forward to hearing from you.
Sure. It's my pleasure to be here and talk about Oasis, and thank you for considering us as a bright spot. We have been part of the work you described for, this is our 34th school year. So we've been doing some of that work, and we're energized and excited and revitalized now that the pandemic has subsided. But since 1989, thousands of children across the country have improved their literacy skills and discovered the joy of reading with support from Oasis tutors. Oasis Intergenerational Tutoring is a volunteer program that pairs older adults with children in grades K through 3 to work one-on-one each week as their tutors, mentors, and friends. And Oasis tutors use a 6-step approach to literacy designed by educators that emphasizes improved reading, speaking, listening, and writing. Our partners are school districts and other community organizations. And the school districts appreciate our benefits, which include our expertise in engaging, recruiting older adults in schools and mentoring practices, and step-by-step implementation guidelines, ongoing support from our staff across the country, online resources, and tutoring training on a variety of topics that we pay attention to as our school districts have concerns. And those, besides increasing competence and motivation and enjoyment of reading and writing, we've trained our tutors in trauma sensitivity, restorative practices, social emotional learning, and using literacy-based curriculum written by our educators. So our tutors connect with students as they're building literacy skills. And so they're also mentoring them. And the students grow to trust their tutors and are open to talking and sharing with them. The tutoring session is a safe place for a student to make mistakes, to use their imagination, to laugh, sometimes complain, and develop key social emotional skills. The students enjoy the one-on-one attention, and the tutor enjoys giving the time to the student. The students learn without knowing it because they're having fun. Our tutors are trained initially about 6 to 12 hours of training, depending on the method chosen by the school district. And then they have regularly scheduled enrichment meetings within the school district for continued training. These additional meetings build tutoring communities within the school district or the Oasis Center. We evaluated our training as we're constantly doing, but we had a little more time during the pandemic, and we incorporated more mentor training and more social emotional training for our tutors. And so they're all experiencing that this year, and they're doing really well with our training.
Mary, can you share how many locations Oasis has and how many adults are engaged in volunteering?
So I can share with you our pre-pandemic stats because our current stats are a little bit in flux as we're re-energizing. So prior to the pandemic, we had almost 4,500 volunteer tutors across the country. We are currently in 14 states, 20 cities, and approximately 82 school districts this time. So we have
Great.
both Oasis centers that have all of the Oasis programming, including tutoring, and then we have tutoring sites across the country as well, where they're just school districts with the one program.
Great, thank you. And we'll have a chance to ask Mary questions and engage in a moment. So kind of taking it from that very hands-on, Jenna, we'd love to hear from you about how a state, a very progressive state, sees this and what your experience is and where you are on this path.
Great. Thank you, Craig. So we are the Michigan Community Service Commission, and those of you that are familiar with AmeriCorps, each state has a commission to oversee and support AmeriCorps opportunities in their state. And that funding comes through us. But in addition, we are also designated, we began as a governor's initiative as a lead agency for volunteerism. And embedded in there also, what was wonderful is during Rich was now Secretary Granholm, who was governor at the time, she led and began an initiative called Mentor Michigan. So we're able to bring all these things together. So it was during COVID that we began to realize, how do we coalesce this together and support volunteers with finding ways to help? The governor was very instrumental and helpful. And so we were able to generate a team of about 9,000 people that wanted to help in some way. What's been beautiful is each time there's another initiative that the governor's office or that we in the state see as a need, then we reach out to those 9,000 volunteers as a team and say, are you interested? So what happened was the governor announced a Michigan Kids Back on Track tutoring program. And then we, within a very short time, had over 1,000 people who said they're interested. So what we did from there is we were trying to figure out, as far as identify ways to match and also understand who those individuals were. We found that over half of them were 55 and above, which is great. And our goal was, how do we connect them, like I said, to the schools, either in person or virtually. We know that some of those individuals wanted to help with a school district, and some might be more interested in helping with a nonprofit that helps the schools, just like what Mary was describing. And I think that's really important to note too, because as we look at this challenge before us, is that as schools come out of this, and my background was as an educator, I also helped run an after-school program. And so coming from a perspective of an individual who actually was boots in the ground at one point in time, I recognize the need of how we have to put an infrastructure in place to be able to help support schools. So the nonprofits and the work, for example, that Mary just described is going to be critical, but also we began working with Inspiring Service, and his work has just been fantastic of how do we build like a graph or a network of schools and school districts and nonprofits who are able to work with this population and be able to make an impact. What everyone's looking for, though, is how do we find that entry point? What is it that we can do that we can actually visibly see that is there? So what we're working on right now is we have a platform. We're calling it My Serves, but it may morph to another name. But what it does is it wonderfully weaves together. I'm old enough in my 60s, so I'm actually in this age group that we're talking about. And so that time period for us was we had like a Yellow Pages or a phone book that we wanted to find. And so our goal was, how could we in the state of Michigan have this phone book per se of the nonprofits and also all the schools, so people could have at their fingertips ways that they could help, either by donating and ensuring the sustainability and or being there in person, either virtually and in person as far as helping. So that's what we're working on right now, is building that network, looking at ways we can identify mentoring. We're also having it be a place that if individuals want to serve through national service, all of our AmeriCorps programs and AmeriCorps senior programs will be identified there. So people, again, can think about being a skills volunteer. They can think about specific ways and what their entry point is, but allows them to be in one place. And then what we're doing is, even with our AmeriCorps seniors program, the older adults are going to be helping through project management, support that sustainability of success in all of the different entities, both nonprofits and schools. So we're excited about where this is going to take us.
Fantastic. And I do want to share that Jenna not only is so effective at the implementation side, she's very much a visionary and has helped drive, the vision of where work in her state is going, but way well beyond her state. At this point, I think, Kate, I want to throw it kind of back to you to lead the discussion and some of the, the questions that you have and how our network can share their experiences in ways that might help you and vice versa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Craig. And also just want to double click on the thank you to Mary and Gina for sharing your expertise. I think Mary, super excited always to hear about longstanding programs that are engaging older Americans in this work, and also how you shifted during the pandemic, given the need to shift. So really appreciate you sharing there. And Gina, that website, your tool, the Finder tool, I saw it last night for the first time, got very excited. So maybe I'll share it, or I don't know if you want to share it in the chat, but it's a really exciting way, I think, for folks to be able to, a range of stakeholders to think about how they might engage in supporting their communities, which can be really hard to find those opportunities. So I really appreciate the hard work that you, that Craig, that others have been doing to support folks in Michigan there. So to our discussion, really a big part of what we're working to do through this initiative at the National Partnership for Student Success is identify barriers to implementation of NPSS aligned student supports. So barriers to implementation of programs or services or initiatives that get more tutors, mentors, success coaches, college advisors, and wraparound support coordinators to students. And so that's kind of one piece. And we're also looking, as I mentioned before, to identify creative solutions or good work that already exists in the field so that we can support schools and youth serving organizations or programs in reducing barriers, learning from lessons that peers have already learned, and pitfalls that others can avoid, and also understand that this work is going on, it is possible. That doesn't mean it's easy, but there are good models for how to do this work well already, and it should not require recreating the wheel. So I'm excited to hear from this group as leaders in the field. I know it's a diverse group in terms of the roles that you play in your communities, but I have a couple of questions about knowing what you know now about the National Partnership for Student Success, what barriers you might see to implementation of this type of work in your context, and what creative solutions you've seen. So I'm going to put a couple of questions on my screen for you to reflect on, and then we can discuss as a group. If I can manage screen sharing. Here we go.
I'm going to take 1 second and just
Yeah.
acknowledge Betsy, who was able to join us late, which is pretty much the reason most, if not all of us are here. She really was the person who pulled together the Encore network, has since gone on to enjoy other aspects of life, but welcome, Betsy.
Thanks, Craig, and it's great to see so many leaders from very different parts of the Encore world. So it's great to be here. I co-lead a college mentoring program, and I'm always interested in what works at all levels of supporting student success.
It's great to meet you, Betsy. I'd love to learn more under separate cover about your college mentoring work, since that's another interest of mine and of this initiative, but excited to have you here and learn from your expertise. So more specifically, the first two questions that I'd love for this group to reflect on, whether it's I encourage you to reflect in the chat, but also to unmute yourself so we can have a conversation. What's an example of a barrier or challenge that your organization, network, community, whichever term is applicable to your particular role, that you've faced in implementing student supports or youth supports in partnership with schools or districts? And I say schools and districts because this is where a lot of this work is taking place, but I'm also interested in this in other environments. So thoughts on this initial question of barriers or challenges, and then we'll go on to the next one.
Well,
oh, go ahead, Doug.
I was just going to get us started. One of the barriers that we see is that not all schools are ready yet to bring in people, and particularly non-school staff. And many of the organizations that provide that kind of support are a bit in flux as well, partly because a lot of the people who volunteer in these roles are not sure they want to be in person, and not all of them have moved into kind of a virtual relationship or role that meets the needs both of the students and the volunteers. So that's probably more than one, but I think to sum up, I think there's a lot of uncertainty that still hasn't been worked out.
Absolutely. And I think those are some high level, super important points. I saw somebody else had raised their hand and now it's down again, but feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Dorothy.
Dorothy.
Hi, I'm sorry, Mike. My camera's not working today. But I was going to say the exact same thing that Doug had said. The schools being reluctant and older adults being reluctant to go back into the classroom. It's a big barrier. We lost quite a few volunteers over the pandemic, but we are getting back our volunteers, and we are getting back the schools. So we used to be in 25 schools. This year we're in 21. So we're getting back there.
Dorothy, can you share, the name of your program and where you're located?
Yes, I'm with Grand Involve. I'm the founder and executive director. We're in Fairfax County, Virginia, which is outside of DC. It's a huge school district. Out of 140 elementary schools, we have 41 Title I schools. And we send older adults into the Title I schools to assist the teachers with individual children or small groups of children to either obtain or maintain their grade level expectations. Before COVID, we had 164 volunteers in 25 schools, and now we have close to 80 in 21 schools. So, like I said, we're getting back there. I'd also like to add that our organization is all volunteer, and that is a barrier for us. The fact that even I am not paid, everybody that's involved with us is a volunteer.
I appreciate you sharing that, Dorothy. And when I get on to my next set of questions, I'm interested in hearing a little more about how some of your creative solutions to getting back on track with the school partnerships. But agreed, the all volunteer setup is challenging.
Yes, we are right now marketing to all the different all the different magisterial districts to get more volunteers. So our board of supervisors and our school board members are all advertising for us, which is very helpful.
Absolutely, and that's a barrier that has been expressed to me in a few other groups like this, just around marketing and getting the word out. So appreciate that, Dorothy.
Yeah.
Dorothy, there's a great question in the chat. Do you provide the background checks, or how are background checks accomplished with your organization?
Our school district pays for the background checks of our volunteers who are in the classrooms. We don't need a background check for our leadership volunteers who are like our board members who are not in classrooms, but anybody that's in a school receives the background check through the school district.
Kate, there's another potential barrier that I wanted to surface, and that is messaging. Getting through to people in a way that creates a compelling case. And I'm wondering if you've given that some thought, and maybe you want to wait and talk about that later. But I think that's a huge hurdle for for many of these programs, and on looking on the other side, I think to motivate people to
Oh, Doug, you seem to have frozen. Was it just for me or is it for
No,
everyone?
he's frozen.
It's frozen.
Well, and just building on that, Kate, you mentioned that this really should be good for both parties, the people who are providing the services as well as those receiving it. And I'm not sure that comes through on the messaging on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, this is feedback I've gotten before. And I think the good news is there that I think we at the MPSS are well positioned to help with some of that. Not that we've solved that challenge, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about. And I'm excited to collaborate with others on that. I think the feedback that I've heard, particularly as it relates to older Americans, is that a lot of the messaging is focused on kind of the health benefits of getting out of the house, which kind of doesn't take into account the fact that most people who are retiring right now are looking to really engage and give back to their communities and develop. This isn't just about getting out of the house. This is about developing as a professional, even in your retirement. And I think shifting some of that messaging was some of the feedback that I received. But the more input on what might be useful there, in particular, to the older adult population is super helpful, whether it's now or in via email.
And it's Betsy. Knowing a lot about Dorothy Keenan's program, I've been an admirer and champion for a number of years. I wanted to mention the fact that her program is very aware that its volunteers are, I would say, primarily white, and they're working with students of color. And I think, Dot, you've really thoughtfully developed some programs around cultural competency. I'm also looking at Mary Click of Oasis, thinking Oasis probably has similar programs so that as people who may think, how can I be relevant to students from a very different background, that there are resources that can really make a difference for the tutors and mentors.
And Patty, I see your hand is up.
Yes, so back to the messaging I did, Kate, one of the things I noticed in just this short video that we viewed was that the pictures were of a lot of young people working with the students. And so it might help to maybe build in some older adults in those pictures. Oftentimes the subliminal stuff that we don't notice makes a difference. So I'd suggest, that. And then in terms of the information you want to share, you might think about highlighting the skills that older adults bring, their skills and their years of technical expertise, as opposed to we're helping you get out of the house. Please help us. You have years of math experience, bring your math experience, that kind of thought.
And that was something Jenna hit on as well, that older adults, they have the project management skills. I mean, they have really a spectrum of skills, and it isn't just putting them into a slot and having them do a single thing.
The other thing to add on, this is Jenna, with the messaging is this balance we all have to have too. As we're going out and recruiting, we want to generate excitement. But as we already heard, sometimes the schools, they're not ready or they don't have the infrastructure to be able to receive them. They don't have the capacity. So then their challenge is messaging of excitement, inspiration, but how do we allow them to help people realize that part of the gift is also the waiting and patience as they build, either trying to help build it to get capacity there and or being patient and not leaving this space, because as we all know, I think older adults are more apt to do that and try and hang in there with us, I guess is the point. So I think that's actually a strength of us as well that we need to recognize.
super helpful input, and I appreciate Patty, that is feedback I've gotten and that I have intentionally shifted via social media, though it does need to be, you're totally right, it needs to be updated in that video. And I think this is very helpful feedback. I appreciate it. On apart from messaging, other barriers, before we go into kind of the other side of this around creative solutions.
I would say that one of the barriers in a long-term program like we have is so much change in school leadership. People were aware and partnering with our program for many years, but retirements happen. Many educators left the field during the pandemic, and so it's a challenge and an opportunity, I guess, to re-educate those who are now in those roles, those teachers, those principals, those administrators, on the benefits of the program. And we've spent a lot of time doing that because of all of the changes in just staffing in our school districts.
Absolutely. And I saw another piece of feedback similar to that in the chat as well. And
Carol, it looked like you have 2 questions, but they aren't typed in yet. You just want to speak them?
Yeah, sorry. Here, I'll even put myself on video. Yes, I screwed up on the sending the message. I'm working on a project in California looking at early ed. California, like so many other states, is now mandated to serve preschool, all 4-year-olds in California, getting to full implementation over the next few years. The worker shortage to accomplish that with the higher qualifications for lead teachers and also staff to student ratios was pretty overwhelming and threatening to effective implementation. So my first question was, are any of you or your programs looking at preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds, and way older people can be helpful in those roles? It all sounds like it's K through 3 or K through 12, which is great, but I'm curious about that. And the second question I have is, we're all guessing, about what do older people want? And I would guess that is varies by community, neighborhood, whatever. And I'm curious if any of you have seen surveys that actually ask some detailed questions about what do older people want in terms of amount of commitment, the kind of work that they want to do, what kind of duration of commitment they're willing to make, what kind of training. Claire Jordan, who's on this call with me, is helping me with this research project, and we haven't found any good current surveys, but it sounds like maybe Michigan's done some of that. So those 2 questions, early ed and any good surveys about what do older people want along those dimensions. Thanks.
One of our prior webinars, one in July from Kim Dykewald, touched on some of that survey data, not everything that you're asking for, but if you haven't seen that, I definitely encourage you to see that.
How do I find that? Just by Encore Network? Anyway, if you could,
Kelly, do you want to
get in touch with you? I can get in touch with you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, great. Thank you.
Does anyone want to, address? I mean, I can. Yeah. What about pre-K?
Yeah. So one, Craig, it would actually be great to share that, if that link could be shared in the follow-up materials with the recording. I think the more ammunition I have to share with people as questions for resources like this come up, the more I'd love to share and direct folks to the existing resource that you already have. On pre-K, really, we have been primarily focused on K-12, but are not excluding pre-K from this conversation. I think in particular, early literacy is a place where there's a particular focus that you're right, it is a lot of K-3. But we do have some supporting champions on board, for example, Jumpstart, who do focus on pre-K. So there are programs within the network, though I think the majority of the focus has been K-12, but that doesn't mean that it's the only focus or the only important piece. I know that's kind of a roundabout question, or a roundabout answer to that question, but.
Great. Do you want to move on to?
I do. I do. And just as I know, there's a lot of expertise on this call. There are a lot of barriers. I'll put my email in the chat. I encourage you to reach out to me directly if you think of things, we've missed, if you have solved one of these barriers that we just talked about, and you have a resource that we should be sharing far and wide, share it with me. I will share it out. But my next question, as we shift kind of from, can you see my screen? From barriers to potential solutions. What barrier busters or solutions to some of the barriers that we just talked about would make a difference for you? So, and this is for your organization, your network, your community. And so think big here. This is an initiative that's operating on a national level that, I obviously can't make any promises for what we can do, but if there are things like, a national media campaign focused on recruiting older Americans into volunteer roles, that's something we can consider. That's on the table. What other barrier busters might make a difference for your organization in expanding tutoring, mentoring, success coaching, college advising, etc.?
This is Jenna. I'll jump in really quick. I think that there's real value, and it feels good to see numbers of recruited individuals, but I'll bring back the importance of the investment in capacity. And how do we talk to funders? Because again, they like to oftentimes see that recruited and the impact of directly working with a student, but it isn't as instantaneous as that. There has to be, for the nonprofits that we hear on the call, they need that support, and they need that conduit also of support for the schools, because otherwise we will fall short of this endeavor if we don't think of that.
Absolutely. And you raise a critical point here that, a huge barrier to implementation is that nonprofits have limited budgets, limited staff. And you're right, funders want to fund the direct service staff, as they should, but it takes a coordinator, somebody to actually do that recruitment. I think I was excited over the summer to see AmeriCorps really focus on the Volunteer Generation Fund, and which is specifically focused on that. How can we help organizations that are recruiting volunteers more effective at doing so, or get them more capacity to do so? But critical point, critical barrier to overcome. Other barrier busters or creative solutions to these or other challenges that you've seen implemented in your community, within your organization, within your network?
So I think, Tom's comment in the chat really speaks to a barrier buster that we need, which is, where are the examples of the models that are working? I mean, he cites a real opportunity there. I don't know if it exists, if it's on your site, Kate, or elsewhere, but would be interested in seeing if we can point him in a direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. It does not yet exist. There are models for how this works well. Mary just presented one. Gina just presented one, but in terms of something that's more accessible, like, here are the first 3 to check out, and here's some information on what, some pitfalls to avoid, some strategies that they use to establish these partnerships. That's super critical, and it is something that's in the pipeline for us.
I think another barrier buster could be, you talked about a national campaign to make people aware and to engage. But I think once engaged, people like to know that they're part of something that's successful. And I think, finding ways to measure success in a simple way that can be conveyed to people so that they feel like if they are involved, that they're part of something that's making a difference. So you can feel like you're making a difference on a one-to-one basis in a tutoring relationship, but I think you want to see the larger impact, particularly if we're drawn to this work as a result of a conviction that in fact there is a desperate need and that it's going to have consequences if we don't meet it. So I think over a period of a 3-year campaign, you want to have some way to help people understand the progress that we're making toward the goal that we set.
And I know we're getting close to time, and it's important that we stay on time and respect people's time. So I want to give, Kate, Jenna, and Mary a chance for kind of a last word, but I also want to thank, Doug and Patty for helping pull this together and having this program. We want this to be the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Kate has a huge vision out there, 250,000. It is possible. Jenna's shown that with thousands of people responding to the call for action very quickly. So let's continue this conversation, but I want to give each of you a chance for a final comment, whether that's action people should take or whether that's how do we keep the conversation going. So Mary, why don't we go Mary, Jenna, Kate?
Sure. I think that gathering together like this has been so important to our organization and to me personally. We didn't start doing this as much, or maybe I just wasn't involved until the pandemic. And it was so helpful to glean from other organizations because as our president often says, there is so much need and so much work to be done. There's room for all of us across the country to do it. And thinking about that, and I certainly enjoy hearing what has worked as we think about our own expansion at OASIS and piloting other programs and what has worked, what has worked, and what definitely has not. And we grow and move from that. So I appreciate all of you and hearing everything that you do as I think toward the future and re-energizing our own program.
Right. And I'll just add to what Mary just said. Kate, I think the beautiful part about this conversation and what you're doing is to have work go forward. We need that backbone entity to be able to bring us together. So hats off to you on all the work that you're doing. And for us on this call, I think what we're all hearing is that there's work that's successful that people are doing, but we're looking to see how we build on that with each other. And I think that there's a lot of interest and I'm excited about where this is going to take us. So thank you so much for everyone on the call.
And thank you, Mary and Gina. I really appreciate everyone on this call and your willingness to take time out of what I know are super busy schedules, supporting schools and communities to engage in this type of conversation. Getting feedback from folks who are actively implementing programs, actively engaging with key stakeholders of the MPSS is super important to this work, and really is critical to ensuring that as we develop strategy for how to engage people in this work, it's actually grounded in the needs of folks who are implementing and folks who are being served. So I really appreciate it. And like Craig said, this really is the beginning of the conversation. I encourage you to reach out to me via email. I would love for your organizations to join as supporting champions to the National Partnership for Student Success. That really entails engaging in a lot of conversations like this, giving folks feedback, collaborating with others who are doing similar or aligned work. So excited to continue the conversation. And thank you, Craig and Doug, for the opportunity to present to this group.
Well, thank you, Kate, Jenna, Mary, and to all of the people who joined us today and for your thoughtful comments. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you. We're all in this together, and let's help students succeed. So with that, we'll close the program for today and look forward to the next conversation.